The teletype machine runs. A signal received. And then the words, not paraphrased, not summarized, the words themselves. 8 panzer divisions, the entire Luftwaffe reserve, 1,000 fighter aircraft to be committed without delay. An immediate counterattack between Mortagne and Avranches. Reach the coast of the Cotentin Peninsula, annihilate the enemy. These are categorical orders. It is August 2nd, 1944. The directive comes from the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. It goes to Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, Commander-in-Chief West, at his headquarters at La Roche-Guyon, a chateau on a bend of the Seine. It tells him to attack with forces he barely has. Through skies his aircraft cannot contest, toward a coast his armies have not seen in weeks. It is written with the certainty of a man who believes certainty is a military instrument. But before that directive reached Kluge, before the teleprinter at La Roche-Guyon finished its work, it had already been read in London. British intelligence had intercepted the order in full. The Allies knew the attack was coming. They knew the divisions, the axis of advance, the objective. They used Hitler's own directive as the blueprint for the encirclement. The counterattack meant to save 2 German armies would instead finish sealing the largest trap the Western Front had ever produced. This is the story of what followed. 6 weeks before those orders arrived, the German position in Normandy was already failing. Operation Cobra, launched on July 25th by Lieutenant General Omar Bradley's American forces near St. Lo, broke through the western hinge of the German line in 4 days. The front didn't bend. It collapsed. By August 1st, American forces had captured Avranches, the last town anchoring the German line against the sea. The western corner was gone. On that same day, Lieutenant General George S. Patton took command of the newly activated U.S. Third Army and turned it east and south into open country behind the German flank. His spearheads were moving through Norman roads that the Germans had no formations to defend. The front that had held for 6 weeks was now a memory, and the armies that had held it were shadows of what they'd been in June. They were fuel-starved, under constant air attack. 6 weeks of attritional warfare had reduced divisions to battalion strength. German supply convoys could barely move by daylight. On the Eastern Front, Operation Bagration had gutted Army Group Center in June and July, absorbing every reserve formation Berlin might otherwise have sent west. Germany was bleeding simultaneously on 2 continents, and no reinforcements were coming. This is the position those 8 panzer divisions were supposed to attack from. On August 8th, Allied Ground Forces Commander General Bernard Montgomery issued the order that formally named what was now possible. The Allied armies would converge on the Falaise-Chambois area, the Canadians pushing south from the north, the Americans driving north from the south, 2 armies closing like the faces of a vice. Inside that vice, the German 7th Army and the 5th Panzer Army. Perhaps 150,000 men, most of their armor, their artillery, their supply trains. The geography of the trap is simple. Falaise to the north, Argentan to the south. A shrinking pocket between them. 2 German armies, and the only question is whether Berlin understands what is happening. Between Hitler's orders and the field's reality stood one man. Günther Adolf Ferdinand von Kluge is 61 years old in August 1944. A general feldmarschall, the highest rank the German army confers. He commanded the 4th Army through Poland, through France, through the opening of Barbarossa. He commanded Army Group Center through the crisis of December 1941, when the Soviet counter-offensive came within reach of Moscow. His nickname, earned over a career built on tactical improvisation, is Der Kluge Hans. Clever Hans, by any measure, one of the most capable commanders on the Western Front. He arrived in Normandy in the 2nd week of July, physically diminished. 9 months earlier, on a road between Minsk and Smolensk, his staff car left the road. He had spent most of a year in recovery. when he stepped into the command that Rommel and Rundstedt had just vacated, in the same week, by the same hand. He was not the man who had held Army Group Center together in the winter of 1941. He was a man who had not fully recovered from one disaster and was walking into another. Those who worked with him describe cold and sharp eyes. Rarely intimate, formal, even with subordinates who had served under him for years. But on the battlefield, more passionate than anyone else in the room. A commander who improvised, who found solutions others couldn't see. In August 1944, that talent has nowhere to go, because the problem is not tactical. Kluge knows the men who tried to kill Hitler on July 20th. Several of them served on his own staff. He knew their activities. He refused to offer his support unless Hitler was already dead. The hedge of a man who understood what a failed plot cost. It didn't matter. His name appeared on the Gestapo's list anyway. Hitler had seen it. By the time the crisis reaches its peak, Kluge is not simply commanding a failing army. He is a man who believes he could be arrested at any moment, who knows that outright defiance carries a show trial and piano wire at Plötzensee prison. He obeys Hitler's orders, not merely from the habit of command, but from the calculus of survival. The habit and the calculus are both pulling him in the same fatal direction. On the morning of August 2nd, Group Captain F.W. Winterbotham sits in a basement in London and records Hitler's directive on 2 full sheets of ultra paper. The intercept is complete. It lists Kluge's instructions in considerable detail. The panzer divisions to be assembled on short notice, the axis of attack toward Avranches, the objective of reaching the sea. Winterbotham gets the message to Churchill without delay. Eisenhower reads it and redirects Montgomery accordingly. Close the trap from the north, while Bradley closes from the south. The same order Hitler sends to save his armies in France is, at the moment of its transmission, already being used by his enemies to destroy them. Every formation Kluge moves toward Mortain is a formation moving deeper into closing jaws. Every hour those panzers spend driving west is an hour the Canadians spend pushing south, the Americans pushing north, the gap between the two pincers tightening. Hitler's own directive, his boldest stroke on the Western Front, is the blueprint of the Allied encirclement. Kluge doesn't know this. The panzer commanders moving toward Mortain don't know it. The men in the vehicles don't know it. They know only that they have been ordered to attack. Operation Luttich begins in the early hours of August 7th. In places, the Germans push several miles into American positions. For a few hours, it looks like something that doesn't hold. Allied aircraft find the columns in daylight. Typhoon fighter bombers come in low and put their rockets into packed formations on narrow Norman roads. The advance stalls. By August 8th, the offensive is already losing momentum. By August 13th, it is over. 120 tanks and assault guns lost, more than 2/3 of everything committed. The German forces are not close to Avranches. They are in the wrong place entirely, pinned at the western end of the pocket, while behind them, to the south, the road toward Argentan is almost undefended. At his headquarters, Kluge tells his chief of staff, "It's a madhouse here." Not an order, not a request, a statement of plain professional reality from a man whose formal bearing has held through weeks of disintegrating reports. He has said so in the precise language of a general feldmarschall to anyone in Berlin who would hear it. He is not heard. Hitler's response to the failure of Luttich is to demand it be renewed with greater intensity. He orders the 9th Panzer Division, nearly the only formation standing between Patton's Third Army and the open road north, transferred to Mortain to reinforce an offensive that has already failed. The last piece blocking the southern approach is moved away from it, on direct orders from Berlin, to reinforce a trap the Germans are already inside. Meanwhile, the southern jaw tightens. General Leclerc's 2nd French Armored Division sweeps through Alençon on August 12th, and by August 13th, the American 5th Armored Division is looking down at Argentan from the high ground to the north. General Eberbach, commanding what remains of the German forces on the southern face, sends a warning to Army Group B. The message is unambiguous. An immediate and quick retreat on a large scale is necessary, because otherwise a complete collapse of the southern flank was unavoidable. He describes the defense holding Argentan. What's left of the 116th Panzer Division, stretched thin on both sides of the town, not a defense, an outline. Two American Army commanders, Patton at 3rd Army, Hodges at 1st, are both asking for permission to close the gap. General Collins at 7th Corps tells Hodges he is certain he can reach Falaise before the British even start to move. They are calling it the opportunity of a lifetime. On August 13th, Bradley orders Patton's 15th Corps to halt at Argentan. The gap stays open. 14 miles north, the Canadians are fighting through the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. Operation Totalize. A night attack, armored personnel carriers guided through darkness by electronic aids, takes Verrières Ridge and pushes to Hill 195. Then, on the night of August 13th, a Canadian officer takes a wrong turn in the dark and drives into German lines. He is killed. On his body, German soldiers find a copy of the operational orders for the next Canadian attack. The 12th SS repositions accordingly. One wrong turn, one dead officer, and the defenders gain another 2 days. Operation Tractable goes anyway on August 14th. 800 heavy bombers strike first. By August 15th, the Canadians are within a mile of Falaise. The two Allied pincers are now fewer than 15 miles apart. On that same day, Allied forces land in southern France. Operation Dragoon opens a second front below the Loire. Hitler will later call August 15th the worst day of his life. His position in France is not disintegrating. It is dissolving. And somewhere in the Norman countryside, on a road between one ruin and another, Field Marshal von Kluge's radio truck has just been destroyed by Allied aircraft. The trap is set. The walls are closing. The clock has nothing left on it. By August 16th, the pocket measures roughly 40 miles east to west. The escape corridor, between Chambois and Saint-Lambert-sur-Dive, is 2 miles wide. Through it, tens of thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, horses, artillery pieces, supply wagons. The fragments of what had been 2 German armies funneling into a space the width of a country lane under continuous air attack and artillery fire from 3 directions. General Luttich of the 2nd Panzer Division looks at the road and later describes what he sees. Mountains of vehicles, dead horses, dead soldiers, increasing in number by the hour. The Typhoon pilots work in shifts, rocket salvos from low altitude into packed columns with nowhere to scatter. From above, the pilots look down at roads that have become rivers of fire. The Dives River, at the bottom of the valley, runs dark. Its banks and shallows are choked with the bodies of men and horses who didn't make the crossing. The infantryman, moving through bocage without cover, navigates by the fires of burning vehicles ahead. The horse-drawn supply wagons that formed the backbone of German rear echelon logistics cannot find a route that isn't already blocked. Deep in the Forêt de Gouffin, tucked away from roads that no longer lead anywhere safe, there is a German field hospital. Allied soldiers find it during the clearing operations. 250 wounded men. No supplies, and no personnel. Left where they were when the retreat began, and the roads filled with fire. Somewhere in this corridor, General Oberst Paul Hauser moves on foot. He is 64 years old, the commanding general of the German 7th Army, or what remains of it. He wears the Knight's Cross at his collar and a black eye patch over the socket where his right eye was, lost 3 years earlier on the Eastern Front. He is bleeding. Around him, the corridors are narrowing with each passing hour. The cloud ceiling settles once. Allied aircraft are grounded for a few hours. The columns move faster. Then the skies clear, and the typhoons return. Gunner Eberhard Beck of the 277th Infantry Division sees a soldier sitting on a stone at the side of the road. He reaches down and takes the man by the arm to pull him to safety. The man rolls to the ground. He's already dead. On August 19th, the 1st Polish Armored Division moves for Hill 262. General Brigady Stanisław Maciek is 51 years old. He commanded the only fully mechanized unit in the Polish army in September 1939, when Germany crossed the border. He has been fighting since that first week, through France, through exile in Britain, and now through Normandy, at the head of an armored division of men who have not seen Poland in 5 years and do not know when or whether they will. The Soviet armies racing toward Warsaw from the east are not liberating Poland in any meaningful sense. Maciek and his men are fighting for a Western Allied victory that may not, in the end, save anything they left behind. Their motivation at Falaise is not strategic. It is something older and more particular. They have debts that no peace treaty will settle. Hill 262, Mont Ormel to the French, Makzuga, the Mace to the Poles, is a wooded ridge above the Dives Valley. It commands the last escape corridor from above. Whoever holds it controls what moves beneath. 2 Polish battle groups take the ridge on August 19th. Then the counterattack begins. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps comes for them. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich and the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen, hammering at the Polish positions while below, the remnants of an army push through whatever gap they can find. 1,500 Poles on a ridge, cut off, short of ammunition, against the mass desperation of 100,000 men who need to get through. On the morning of August 20th, the SS forces a temporary breach. By midday, close to 10,000 German soldiers pour through before the Poles close it again. At Saint-Lambert-sur-Dives, Major David Curie holds the river crossing with fewer than 200 men from the South Alberta Regiment. 3 days. Close to 3,000 German casualties. He does not yield the crossroads. He was not a household name before this moment. He is a young Canadian officer with a crossroads to hold, and he holds it. At noon on August 21st, the last SS assault breaks against the Polish positions at point-blank range. The Canadians arrive to relieve the ridge. The survivors on Mont Ormel have held for 2 days against everything that remained of the German armored force in Normandy. They have lost 1,400 men, 350 of them on the ridge itself. On August 21st, Canadian and American forces link at Chambois, the Pocket Seals. That evening, after a French priest, Abbé Launay, pleads with the last German commander to stop, the remaining troops surrender. Not a general, not an army, a priest. Montgomery, addressing the Poles afterward. The Germans were trapped as if in a bottle. You were the cork in that bottle. Now, a few days earlier, and a few miles away, something else was happening. On August 15th, Kluge's car was caught in an Allied air attack. His radio truck was destroyed. For several hours, the commander-in-chief West was unreachable. Stranded in the Norman countryside, unable to communicate with either his front or the Wolf's lair. It was the same Allied air superiority killing his soldiers on the death road, working now on his communications. Random violence, no conspiracy, a destroyed radio truck on a French country road. From East Prussia, the silence looked like proof. A man whose name was already on the Gestapo's list, now missing for hours on the same afternoon Allied forces landed in the south of France. Hitler read it as the confirmation of what he had suspected for weeks. On August 16th, Hitler finally authorized a withdrawal. The order arrived when the corridor was 2 miles wide and under continuous bombardment. On August 17th, Kluge was dismissed. Walter Model, the Führer's fireman, the man sent in when every other man has failed, received the order to take command. His first act was to order the immediate retreat of the 7th Army and the 5th Panzer Army. the retreat Kluge had spent 3 weeks trying to authorize. Model arrived with the right answer, and too late for it to matter. Kluge was recalled to Germany. He began the journey east by car. He did not reach Germany. On August 19th, on a road in France, the same day the Poles were taking Hill 262, Günther von Kluge swallowed potassium cyanide. He was 61 years old. Before the end, he had written a letter. It explained the defeat as he understood it, the weight of Allied material, the impossible arithmetic of what his armies had been asked to do. It acknowledged what could not be saved. And then, in the plain language of a man with nothing left to lose, it asked the one person in Germany capable of ending the war to end it. "The German people," he wrote, "have undergone such untold suffering that it is time to put an end to this frightfulness." He addressed the letter to Adolf Hitler. Hitler received it. He refused military honors at Kluge's funeral. 2 days after the pocket sealed, General Dwight D. Eisenhower visited the Falaise battlefield on foot. He would write afterward that it was unquestionably one of the greatest killing fields of any of the war areas, and that the scenes he encountered could be described only by Dante. Historians estimate between 10,000 and 15,000 Germans died in the pocket. Between 40,000 and 50,000 were taken prisoner. These are estimates. The ground did not make precise accounting easy. Somewhere between 20,000 and 50,000 men escaped through the gap, across the death road, across the dives, through the 2 miles of corridor that closed around them. They escaped without their tanks, without their artillery, without most of what had made them an army. But their headquarters escaped. Their command structures escaped. The cadres around which new divisions could be rebuilt, those came out. All 10 German panzer divisions that fought in Normandy were reconstituted around those men. 9 of the 10 came back in December 1944 in the Ardennes, hitting Courtney Hodges's 1st U.S. Army in what the Americans would call the Battle of the Bulge. The men who crossed the Corp's dark dives, who slipped through the 2-mile gap while Allied generals debated boundaries and Berlin sent directives, those men came back. The gap that wasn't fully closed is not a footnote to this story. It is the story's consequence, still running. Kluge's letter sits in the archive. He asked for an end to the frightfulness. He addressed it to the one man who could have agreed. That man did not.